This is Ruth Armitage, goddess of so many things. Painter, many mediums.
Well, thanks for being here, Betty, and thanks for helping out, you guys, my gallery mates. Tim. Hi, Tim. As Nancy said, I've been a member here for about 3 years, and I've enjoyed my association with all the other fine artists represented here. We all work together to make the gallery what it is, from hanging to publicity to website, all of the work that involves selling and shipping and wrapping and all of the things. And I've never worked with a finer bunch. They're just all very responsible and helpful and caring, and can't say enough. One of the great pleasures of showing in a gallery like this is that there's no expectation for you to do work that you've done before, or to make work that's commercially saleable, I guess. You obviously want to make money, but it's not necessarily my prime goal when I paint. The work you see here is about the last 18 months of painting that I've done. Of course, there are other paintings that didn't make the show, but this is all done in the most recently. So the title of the show is Blame It on the Moon, and I chose that title for 3 reasons. The first being that the moon is a symbol of change. It's always in flux how we see it. We move around in the universe. And change has been like the main theme of my life for the last 2 years. I've moved twice. My husband died. My daughter got married. My mother died. Lots of chaotic changes for me. Several breast cancer biopsies. Just, lots of requiring me to be flexible in the moment. And I really worked during that time at looking at life as something that just kind of washes over you. You're still here, and the life just kind of swirls around. Because life for everyone presents hardships at times, and if we can keep our perspective and work through it, hopefully we come out stronger. So that was one of the main reasons for the show being called this. The other reason is that since he's passed, I've become more nocturnal. My sleep hygiene has gone to hell. I don't go to bed on time, and I don't stay asleep necessarily. Some insomnia, and if you've ever had insomnia, you know that your mind kind of goes through these racing cycles. There's a chair right over here.
Oh, good.
It kind of goes through these circuits of turning thoughts over and over again, and not necessarily logical, sort of half dreaming. Not necessarily negative, but a way to process the time that I've had to myself to process all the changes. And then the third type of thematic implications of the title was the eclipse that happened this month. And the last eclipse that came through here, we had totality. I was able to see totality on a friend's farm, and it was a powerful, momentous occasion for me. I felt very small in the grand scheme of things, and I felt a sense of mysticism and connection, I guess, in that moment. It was interesting to watch the cows go into the barn at midday, and the birds stop singing, and all of the changes in light and shadow and pattern. All of those things were very visually stimulating for me, and and made a lot of meaning for me in my place in the world. I can tell my joke now because there are no children here. But I read somewhere yesterday or the day before that life's difficulties are like a wiener. They arise for no apparent reason, but they don't last forever. So my general painting process, it is very unpredictable, I would say, because I work in so many different mediums. But the one thing that remains constant is starting with the title. And I begin, before I started painting for the show, I started thinking of things around the moon and nighttime, nocturnes. And I write those titles on my phone, and I keep a list running, because most of the time the inspiration hits when you're not really in the studio. You're listening to something on television or a movie or reading something or observing something driving down the freeway, and it's not an opportune time to paint. So I just keep that list, and if I can distill the idea into just a brief title, 1 or 2, 3 or 4 words, it helps me to get started in the studio. That doesn't mean that I'm painting toward a visual image that I know what it's going to look like, but more like a feeling or a mood. And the more specific I can be about that before I begin, the more successful the paintings generally are, and the easier they come together. So I love this quote by Tolstoy that says, "Art is not a handicraft. It is the transmission of feeling the artist has experienced." So that's definitely how my paintings begin, is with a feeling, an idea, a memory. And the easiest way for me to interpret those, hi Lisa. The easiest way for me to interpret those feelings in paint is with color. And I would say color is probably my #1 design element that I love. I like to think of color symbolically. Of course, a lot of these nighttime paintings are more cool, in the cool palette. So that's the kind of color that we see at night. But once I start putting color on, my next choices are generally pretty automatic. If I have a thought, I try to follow it. Hey guys.
Hi.
If I say, what if I put red on that, I just try it. I don't generally agonize over those choices. I try to just follow any instincts that I have. And I think that anytime we make personal choices in our work, the work actually becomes more universal. So if I'm painting about a specific idea, as long as it's very close to my heart, ironically, it becomes more applicable to everyone who views it. It's really one of the great mysteries of painting for me, that people can see an image that's totally non-objective and really receive that feeling that I put into the work. I think that following those what ifs takes a lot of courage, because at any point in the process you can really mess it up irretrievably. You can really destroy it. And I try not to judge whether that's happened or not while I'm creating. So I might say, I want this to be a little darker. That's not judging. That's saying it doesn't feel like it's dark enough. yet. I'm following my feelings, my instincts. Whereas if I was judging, I might say, well, that's bad because it doesn't have contrast. So, as soon as I start putting a judgment on it, I shut my decision making down because I'm worried about what's right and what's wrong rather than what's true. And painting, for me, is trying to get to the truth of what I'm feeling. Another thing that I have discovered is that I'm better off if I stop sooner than I think I should. And that's one of the quotes that I wrote down for today from Mark Rothko. There is more power in telling little than in telling all. And I think having some mystery, not explaining everything that's in every painting is important, because I want the viewer to be able to interpret the pieces as they want. Paintings have such a rich life, you know, they have the life between the artist and the work, and then they have the life between the viewer and the work. And sometimes they get painted over by the artist. There are a couple in this show, those two both were different paintings originally, and I decided they needed the axe and painted over them to make something that I liked more. But that's after several years of living as alternate personalities. They became someone new, just they had a new life given to them. I look at my artwork as more than producing objects, but as a practice for examining my own life. So, you know, how many of you enjoy making puzzles? You know, jigsaw puzzles, yeah. That's what it's like for me to make these paintings. To find the truth kind of revealed by putting all these small ideas together. The only difference is that I don't have the box to look at. And so it's really hard to know if there is a piece missing or this is all you get. It's just really hard to know sometimes. And that makes finishing these more difficult. And so, you know, like the edges, the beginning stages can go pretty quickly, but the finishing part can take years. That one took years, several years to finish. That one took those two took several years because they were already exhibited as other people. Now they're different. And I always try to let the work rest between creation and exhibiting. So I try to give it at least several weeks, if not months, before I decide whether or not it's finished. Certain elements in the work crop up over and over. My mark making, the linear work, you'll see that pretty readily. But one of the other things that someone pointed out, and I wasn't even aware that they were in there, but there are several works in the show that have this rectangular thing superimposed over very active areas. And so that one is pretty obvious, it's just a little blue rectangular line. But as you look at the show, there are several others, and I think it'd be interesting for you to try to figure them out. It's not that I put that in there intentionally, it's just that I might have an affinity for bringing a little more order in a painting that is pretty chaotic. And someone asked me why, and I said, well, maybe it's me trying to control my life. You know, these things are very unconscious a lot of times, not necessarily planned. one of the reasons that I do paint is that I enjoy the process, the practice of painting, but I also enjoy the interpretation of painting and hearing what others think of the work or see in the work or feel. There's another quote that I wrote down. It's why it is said that art is a tryst, for in the joy of it, maker and beholder meet. And I think those paintings that reach a viewer and say, come home with me, that's the highest reward that a painter can have, when someone has to take it home and live with it. Questions so far? I want this to be more of a chat, if you have some, yeah.
How do you move your paints around?
Oh, that's a good question. I use a lot of brush work. I use a stiffer brush than most watercolor painters, and acrylic, people use stiff brushes too, but I will really work the paint into the surface with a bristle brush, and I use what's called scumbling. And so taking a dry brush and going over and over and over a really soft pattern to build the paint up. I also use, in my water media paintings, I also use a lot of water. I use a spray bottle. It gives a real fine mist to kind of apply water where I want the paint to go, but in a random way. In this piece I have used tiny brushes for mark making, and also a dip pen, like you would use for calligraphy, or old-fashioned quill sort of pen. In the oil and cold wax paintings, I use a spatula, oftentimes a squeegee type of a spatula. I will move through the paint using a scraping spatula, like a little pointy silicone tool, or a colored pencil, or a colored watercolor crayon. So moving through the wet paint, with a scrapey gestural motion. Other ways. Sometimes I'll wet an area and drop into the paint. Oh, sometimes I use a brayer. Roll through the paint and then apply it with a brayer, a very thin layer. Good question. Artistic influences. I think that this is not what you're going to expect, but one of my big artistic influences in abstract painting are birds. If you listen to birds, I'm kind of an amateur bird watcher, but if you listen, you can hear that this bird is just waking up and it's like, come on, come on, come on, let's go get the worms, come on, come on, come on. Or they're doing like I'm here, let's mate. That same bird might have very different voices for very different things. And even though we don't understand the words, we can understand the meaning in some cases, and we can appreciate it for its beauty in all cases. So I try to think of the language of art as one of those things that's beyond words. So the color for me is a certain meaning, and you could probably guess that by me giving you a little bit of my biographical stuff that's been happening. But it's also brings certain meanings to, different meanings possibly to the viewers. So a bird the same way, we might think the bird is talking about worms, but maybe they're talking about something else. So birds are a big thing. Even though their language is abstract to us, it means something to them. Artistically, I'm very influenced by Cy Twombly, who did a lot of asemic writing, very gestural mark making that looked like letters but wasn't, and really emphasizing that line in his work. Also Joan Mitchell, who was a great had great brush strokes, great mark maker, and strong color. She was very, very good with the color. Another artist that you probably wouldn't see in my work, but that has influenced me is Diebenkorn, Drew Diebenkorn. One of the things I like to study in his work is his use of direction. And it's something I think about as I'm making marks. I think in terms of what directions mean. So if this is in the word, it might be calmer. If this is in the work, it might be more active. But those are both pretty stable compared to this. Something's falling here, or you're climbing, or it's movement, that sort of movement. Directional changes being very interesting in Diebenkorn's work. Definitely not like my squiggly marks. These are very strong and flat, smooth. But also his color, his use of color was very impressive to me. Also Gustav Klimt, another mark maker, very controlled mark making. And I like to play and experiment with both controlled marks and spontaneous, very loose marks. So that, I think, it's fun for me to play with those things. Depending on the subject, I'll use more of one, less of another. And then recently I was looking at a YouTube video of Gerhard Richter talking about his work. And he talked about the concept of unplanned beauty. So being on the lookout for things that happened in the work that were beautiful. And I love that idea, and I find that very descriptive of the way I look and work as I'm painting. I'm looking for something that looks good. It seems sort of obvious, but I do want it to look good. I guess those are all the notes except for this last page. Good, we got through all of that. I'm interested to hear what you see in each of the pieces. Oftentimes you can get a glimpse into my viewpoint by looking at the title. Obviously, that's where I start. I want to talk a little bit about pareidolia, which is when you see something in the clouds, like a dolphin. There's not really a dolphin up there, but we see the pattern that reminds us of a dolphin. I think of that as very normal, learned behavior from evolution. We're in the woods as cave people and we see a stump, or is it a bear? It's important to know. It's important for us to identify what we're looking at. But in looking at abstract art, it's more like listening to classical music. We don't have to define, was Debussy talking about water or moonlight in this Moonlight Sonata. He was probably talking about both in different passages, but those musical notes, they're not saying 2 drops of water, 1 drop of moonlight. They're not making a report. They are poetically saying water, moonlight, those sort of things. So pareidolia in abstract art is saying, okay, in a non-objective piece like this, I see water. Well, it could be water. If that's what you want it to be, it could be water. I was thinking about Guinevere and her green eyes and her flowing hair. So, there's movement in it. That's the most important thing to note. There's movement in it. The more interesting thing to me is to see someone react emotionally to a work. not see what you found. Oh, I see a sailboat, or I see a flamingo, I see, you know, those sort of things. I would be more interested to know, do you feel a sense of unease, or do you feel a sense of joy, or mystery, or sadness, or what is it that you see in the work? Confusion, calm, any of those things. I think that for me is the interesting thing to hear about what people see in the work. What I hoped to have put into the work, and what always draws me in titles, are ideas that have both positive and negative connotation. So adversity and beauty, those two things, how they go hand in hand. Loneliness and love, gratitude and mystery. All of those are things that I try to put into this body of work. So, any other questions?
When you are say preparing for a show and you working in so many different mediums, are you working on everything at the same time, or are you kind of managing one medium at a time?
That's a good question. I work back and forth between mediums, so I'll do several water media paintings, and then I'll do an oil painting. And I like different things about the different mediums. The oil is slower to develop, but you can do more layering, and it looks fresher for longer. The water media is more fluid and more spontaneous, goes more quickly, but it's easy to go too far. That's a good question, though. And I find that that's one of the reasons I haven't settled on a medium, is that I appreciate both types of work. So there are times when I can't even think about doing another watercolor. And then there are times when I don't even want to take out an oil painting. I want to do more water media, more spontaneous, more fluid. So.
Do you find that gestures that you may make on a watercolor, do you try mimicking that or trying to replicate that when you're in a different medium, and has that been successful or not?
I don't think about that. I never think about that. I do try to think about being consistent, but it doesn't usually work out. I guess if I had a choice to be both consistent and true to my own ideas and emotions, I would do that. But for me, these are each different, very different days in the last 2 years. And so it's like saying you're going to a funeral, but you're wearing multicolored stripes. Wouldn't choose that for that day. That's kind of how I choose the day. It's just like you choose your clothing that you're going to put on that day. You know, how many of you who are painters have been painting something and you realize, oh, I'm painting something red and white, and look what I picked to wear today. I didn't even think about it, but there it is. It is that intuitive. It's not like I can go in and say, oh, I really like that rectangle. I didn't even think of it being there. I just thought of that painting was explosive star-like stuff, but it just needed something that reminded me of a little bit of gravity. So I can't necessarily channel the mark making or the color choices. The color is a little bit easier. I can generally start, like I knew with almost all of these paintings, there are a lot of dark contrasts. And I knew I wanted one painting that, because of the title is Nightingale, I didn't want it to be darks and heavy things. I wanted the lightness of birdsong. And even though it's a nocturnal bird, or singing edges of the night, I wanted to think of it that way without putting the dark in. Just leave out that dark. So oftentimes for me, it's not what I put into the painting, it's what I leave out. So that's also an important part. Question?
Do you play music while you're painting? Do you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Does it help you kind of be free or?
It helps me get in tune with my emotion. Helps me, a lot of these are named after the lyrics of songs.
Oh, okay.
So Guinevere, I was listening to Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young over and over and over. Another one. I'll follow you into the dark. Lyrics. Pink Moon is a Drake song. Play It Again. That's about practicing the piano at night with my dad. Play it again. Come on, play it again. Lines from books. Not always even that much. Like recent fiction is more about. That's the middle one with the pinks. That one's more for me about my interior and my exterior persona. So the exterior persona would be at the top, and the interior would be down lower. So, you know, just how are you feeling some days? You put on a cheerful little persona or a mask.
Do you have a favorite painting in this room that you love, and why?
I really like recent fiction. I think it's the most unrecognizable to me. It came pretty purely from just emotion. Whereas other pieces, I recognize my mark making or my palette or my choices in interpreting the shapes or those sort of things.
Is that yellow?
No, it's the pink
The middle
one.
one?
Pink became a real touchstone in this series. I kind of went to it over and over as a color that was contrasting to the cools of the night scenes. Not traditional landscape or not one of my usual colors that I use. It's a sensitive color. So for me, that came up over and over again in the work. I also really like Northern Lights. I feel like that was a breakthrough for me. I have a tendency to decorate every part of the piece, and to be able to leave so much of it fairly empty was a breakthrough, or very subtle parts of it. I like I'll Follow You in the Dark, Into the Dark also. That came after recent fiction, and you probably noticed some similar shapes and marks. The paintings do have a tendency to influence each other. So it's like sitting next to the popular girl. If she's wearing high-cut shorts, you're gonna want to too. Even if they don't look good on you. So they do have a tendency to talk to each other. Make trouble. Question?
What's U-boat?
U-boat is a polypropylene product. It's plastic, basically, and so it's non-absorbent completely. Everything sits right on top. It's like painting on glass. Advantages to that are that you can move the paint around very freely, and it will do its own little magical tricks when you're not even looking. A disadvantage to that is you get something that you really like how it looks, and then you touch it accidentally and it's gone. Once it's dry, it's very stable, but during the painting process, it can be a happy thing or a frustrating thing.
Do you move around your paintings as you're painting them or not?
I do, but only so that I can get a good angle or reach to an area that I want to tackle, not to look at them as a different design way.
Okay.
That's a very good question. I mean, I sometimes will check them after time has passed by looking at them in the mirror or looking at them upside down or something. I'll look and see, you know, how the shapes and the colors are working together and the lines, all that. But not, someone else asked me that at an open studio event and said, can you, you know, once you've done a painting, would you be open to it hanging a different way? And I said, no. No, I painted it this way. It belongs this way. What you do with it once you take it home is up to you, but I would never hang it a different way.
Yeah,
That's
so
how
it comes out that way.
comes out that way.
Yeah.
Tim?
Comment and a question. The comment is interesting what you said about pareidolia. I have a very good art-loving friend that has a very keenly developed sense of pareidolia,
Yeah.
if you want to call it. It almost becomes like a compulsion
Yeah.
to get pictures out of something.
Yeah.
I don't have that at all. And she'll say, don't you see this exactly thing in this? And I said, no.
No, and
You
once
know,
it's
for it
pointed out
doesn't
to
it doesn't
you,
make
you
any
can't
difference to
unsee
me.
it.
I don't
Yeah. I don't like seeing it because then I can't unsee it. And
Yeah.
it might not be what I intended.
No, I like more the sense of mystery and being able to gradually get some sense of what the artist was feeling or trying to
Yeah,
communicate.
that's good.
And it's that the unknown, the sense of mystery that I like as much as saying, oh, I see a picture of this and that painting, therefore I like it, or I don't see anything in it and therefore I don't like it. Question is, you mentioned skipping stones as having been painted over after
Oh,
a year.
not skipping stones, but
Not that
the
one,
two
not-
oil paintings.
Oh, the two oil paintings,
Yeah.
okay.
No,
Yeah, you were
skipping
pointing in that
stones-
direction, yeah, skipping stones.
Skipping stones began as watercolor, and then I did add the acrylic over it.
Right.
That's a painting which is unusual. Usually I paint a painting from start to finish without a break. It might take days or weeks, but I'm like, that's the painting, I'm painting it. That particular work I started and then I went out of town. I can't remember where I went, but I know I was out of the studio. And I came back and looked at what I had started and I just revolted.
So, but you didn't paint over it, you just developed it in a different direction?
Yeah, I painted the whites in and the blacks in, or the darks, you know. I subdued a lot of strong color contrast that I found kind of garish when I returned to the studio
By adding the white and the
by
black.
adding the white and the black.
Interesting.
I kept some of the strong color contrast, but a lot of it got pushed down.
So it had something to do with just being in a different mind state or mood or whatever after
Yeah.
that break of time that caused you to
Yeah.
look
see
at
the
it
color
differently, or
differently.
your original train of thought was derailed in a sense.
Yeah. I always had the idea of it being kind of a watery piece.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, you started with the title,
Yes,
right, without
yeah.
skipping stones.
But
so.
I thought when I began it that I would be able to get away with a lot more color than it actually took. So,
Do you paint flat or?
both. The oils I generally work vertically, but my drafting table has a pneumatic arm on it that I can just flick a switch and it goes up or down. So I can work between any angle, vertical to horizontal. And with watercolor, I generally work fairly flat or at a slight angle. With acrylic, I do both, flat and vertical. So just, and oftentimes it'll be the same piece will have both times when I'm working flat and times when I'm working vertically. So it just depends on, working close up with these little tiny marks, I generally do that flat. The bigger, more gestural marks and brushwork, like the scumbling, that sort of thing, generally happens vertical or more vertically. Yeah, it's something I don't even think about. I just have spaces that I can move things around. I'm working on some oil pieces right now for the Seattle Art Fair. And I have one easel in my studio, and I'm trying to do 3 pieces at once so that they are similar. And so I take one and put it on the easel, stand back from it, paint on it for a little while, and put it on the table, put the next one on the easel, stand back from it, paint on it for a little while, and then keep swapping them. I think at some point in that process, because I don't generally work on 3 pieces at once, I think at some point one of them will become the favorite child and will get a lot more attention until it's finished. And then the next one will become the favorite child. You know, they'll each get a little more one-on-one as I get closer towards the end.
Did you ever have a moment where you felt like your confidence really surged forward as an artist? Or was it always consistently like, yeah, I know I'm an artist and I'm proud of what I do, or did it feel?
Oh, I think every artist goes through peaks and valleys of confidence. I think that one of the things that I decided after doing an art fair, and I was pretty discouraged, was that I was looking outside myself for validation. And it had nothing to do with the work. My discouragement was nothing to do with the work. It was because it had been raining and there was low attendance and people weren't really looking, and you know, it was just circumstantial. And so I just decided I needed to remove myself from situations like that a little bit and only think about the work for myself. Not worry about whether someone put it in a show or whether it sold or but even this show, I mean, there are paintings in this show that I almost didn't include because I wasn't as sure about them. And right away, one of them sold. and it's not so much even that it sold, it's that it provoked intense feeling in people. And that they were receiving the message that I put in it. And maybe I felt unsure about including it because it was so tender to my heart, you know. Sometimes there are paintings that I've never shown anybody. So I don't feel like I have an extraordinary amount of courage or confidence. I feel like I have a lot of curiosity. And if I look at it that way, it removes judgment a little bit. And so, oh, it's interesting to see what people gravitate to, what they see, what they feel or hear, or, you know. And that's, to me, a little bit more removed than allowing you to judge me. Because it does take courage to put these out, you know. Anybody else? Other questions?
May I ask which one sold?
Well, the one in the corner that
Right.
you see, so that's the first one that got a lot of attention. And then Hansel and Gretel, and the top one, Celestial Pull. Yeah. But, you know, it's something I think about, but it's not necessarily whether it gives me confidence or not. It's how was the message received? How was the painting reached its viewer or not reached its viewer? So I think that's always, it's always surprising in some ways to me. Like how do people, I taught a class one time and I was talking about the paintings making meaning for our viewers. And I put up a bunch of different artwork, and I asked the students to, for each slide, put down their response, their emotional response. And there was a painting that looked a little bit like this, only bright red, bright green, bright purple, bright fuchsia, bright orange, bright blue, black, white, all things, all squiggly everywhere. I mean, this much activity through the whole painting. And so, then we went through again, we looked at the work, and I said, so what was your first response when you looked at this? And this lady said, Christmas morning, ribbons and packages and joyful chaos. And another woman looked at it and she said, maggots. Now, it's pretty polar opposite, and we were all white women, over 50, upper middle class, from Oregon, watercolor painters. There were so many similarities in the test group here, and we see Christmas morning and maggots. That's pretty personal interpretation. And then there was this other painting that I put up, and the other thing that I had done in this talk when I asked different artists for their imagery was to say, send me paintings that you feel are the best at showing content beyond the literal image. So this is a literal image of the moon, but what's the content? Is it joy? Is it mystery? Is it sadness? What is the content of that painting? And so I knew what the artists were trying to express. And it was closer to Christmas morning than maggots, let me just But another artist sent this image, and it was also non-objective like this. And she told me what it was about. It was about her husband's death from cancer. And she had specific elements of the painting that, the diagnosis and the despair, and then the glimmering hope of treatment, and then his release of his spirit. And, the highs and lows of all of that experience. And I didn't say anything to the group. I just asked for their response. What's your reaction to this? What is your first feeling about it? And one person came up to me afterward, and she said, I'm a cancer survivor. And the first thing I saw when I saw that painting was cancer.
Wow.
Totally, it was just like, it was received. The message was received. And it doesn't have to have cancer written on it. It doesn't have to have an x-ray pasted on there. It can be that personal and that direct communication between the artist and the viewer. It shocks me over and over what people see. So, thanks you guys for the attention. Oh, one more.
Couple technical questions.
Sure.
What's your favorite watercolor brand?
Oh, what brand of watercolor? I like Winsor Newton, I like Holbein, I like Sennelier, and different brands for different colors. So Viridian, I only like a certain brand. I can't remember what kind it is, but I have it. Indian yellow, I only like a certain brand, and then they'll discontinue it. It's very irritating. Very irritating. Did you have another technical question?
And your cradle board abstracts, they're not varnished?
They have a cold wax finish on them.
Okay.
So the cold wax is inert, and it's like a varnish, it protects them.
I just wondered if maybe a varnish with abstracts is too distracting.
The gloss of it.
Mhm.
I gloss varnished the two on canvas back there. Because I come from a watercolor background, I don't like gloss.
Yeah.
But I think some paintings look better with a gloss varnish or semi-gloss varnish. The cold wax paintings, I generally just use another layer of cold wax and I buff it to sort of a satin finish. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, thanks for your attention. I'd love to have you tell me what you feel about the work and which ones your favorites are and all of that. So I'll be around to visit with you.